The Holy Gospel according to Luke. If you look at the reading that Linda did today, which is actually the second reading for today, we cut the first reading. In this reading from Galatians, Paul reflects on the human condition, that we are imprisoned and guarded, and the necessity of Christ's presence in our lives is to restore us and to set us free. He reminds us of the power of our baptism to free us and unite us as people. And the reading goes on to make the radically inclusive statement that there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male or female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. This would have been shocking news to the early Christians, and quite frankly, it's still shocking news to Christians today. The universal embrace of God's redemptive love remains something that Christians, even after 2,000 years, simply do not always grasp. God's love is there for all people. Every single person on this earth is of worth, and we need to always remember that. Faith is not something we achieve. It is not an achievement, but it is an open, positive, welcoming response to the possibility of God's love in people's lives. And God's love is always there. Christ has set us free to love others, and Christ unites us with others, not just here, but others all around the world. And that is why we have supported Tula, as she has worked to help develop this water project in Tanzania. So today I am deeply grateful that Dave Sacco is here to join us and tell us about that project. Dave, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to come talk to you about this. And of course, thank you very much for the support that you provided to the effort last year. We wanted to give you an update as to how things have been progressing, where we go from here. Just to provide a little context for this, I wanted to explain briefly who in the world I am and who I work with. I'm a civil engineer from New Haven, Connecticut. I've been working with the Yale chapter of Engineers Without Borders for about 14 years. EWB is an organization that was founded 17 years ago, and the underlying idea was it was a way to provide engineering support to communities in need, either in the developing world or in the rural U.S., who needed engineering support, at the same time providing a learning opportunity for university students and exposure to different situations, I guess you'd say. And the core of what we try to do is establish a working relationship with the community, come to understand their interests and needs, and then provide engineering support and financial support to help them achieve some underlying goal. We ended up partnered with the community of Naitolia in Tanzania after doing a couple of projects in Cameroon and one in Honduras. Tula had worked with the community to develop an application that went to the national organization, EWB USA. We saw it available to be adopted and thought it looked like an interesting challenge. And so 2.5 years later, here I am. So this right here, this is a presentation that the students prepared for an EWB state conference last February. I'm just going to take advantage of it because it's full of pictures. That, by the way, so this is a hole in the ground. It's not really high technology. This is not a sophisticated engineering solution, but it is an effective engineering solution. People have been digging holes in the ground and storing water in them for thousands of years, as the people of Naitolia had successfully done for 30-odd years before it failed. We're just helping them put it back. Per the book, people spend a tremendous amount of time and energy in Naitolia getting water. A few of them actually have motos, others use mules, others just carry things on their heads. If you're not familiar, Naitolia is on the northeastern side of Tanzania. It's up near a city called Arusha and Mount Kilimanjaro. The community itself is very spread out. It's a Maasai community. The Maasai are traditionally, formerly kind of semi-nomadic. Livestock is sort of the core of their life, of their existence. Mainly cattle, also goats and sheep. So they tended to meander around following the rain, following the available fodder. Simply because population pressures have increased, the communities have kind of settled down into places. It puts a lot of strain on the environment because you have all of this cattle, all of these goats and things, making a mess of the landscape. It's fairly spread out over probably north to south 4 or 5 kilometers. What we've highlighted here is they rely on a number of seasonal and permanent water sources. There is a well in the community, but for better or worse, the well in the dry season is used by everyone, including the cows and the goats. So there's a lot of pressure on a limited water source, and there's, of course, financial cost associated with using it. You have to buy the fuel to run the generator, to run the pumps, to get the water out of the ground. In addition, there is a seasonal river that flows past the community and a number of ponds of various sizes, some of which are capable of holding water all year. The one that's fairly far away over in the sort of bottom left in Vuvukazi Pond is available year-round, but because it also supports livestock, it's not very clean. This is the pond itself. There's an aerial image from Google Earth. And then that's the beginning of our efforts last August to start digging. You can see from the satellite image in the sort of top right-hand corner, the embankment that was built back in the 80s had breached, periodically overtopping due to heavy rains. Eventually, it just eroded away, and so it no longer held water. It had been probably something like, we're not exactly sure, somewhere around 2007, 2008, they finally were no longer able to keep maintaining it to the point where they could hold water in it. So we originally visited in 2017 to do an assessment, do a bunch of survey work, figure out exactly what the challenges were, why the pond had failed. The picture on the left is it was for the engineers in the room. Soil composition was a serious issue in terms of the reason that the pond had failed. There was some very good quality material that was suitable for building an embankment, and then this darker stratum of soil, which is very clayey and very weak when it's very susceptible to changing volume and to weakening when it gets wet. And a lot of one part of the dam had been built with that, and that was really the underlying reason why it breached. This is, in fact, a picture standing and looking through the gap that had eroded through the wall of the dam. The other problems that were developing was there's a lot of soil erosion uphill from the dam. Partly this is a result of overgrazing. Partly it's also just a natural. The soil is very sandy. It's not very strong on the surface. When the vegetation dies back in the dry season, it's very susceptible to eroding once the rains resume. And anything even as simple as a footpath or a cattle path, over enough time, the water concentrates and you can develop these enormous erosion gullies. That's over my head. That's 5-6 feet deep. So this is the actual work that we had done last year. We engaged a contractor from the city of Arusha who came down. We mined out a lot of the unsuitable material and started filling in the breach and compacting the soil. We were at the same time digging out the basin of the pond, looking for the best quality material to use in the breach as we were building up. So the idea was, we're doing two things. We're restoring some basic functionality to the pond by making sure that it holds water, and at the same time, because we're excavating the construction material out of the pond, we're also creating storage volume. Because over the years, the pond had filled in by soil washing down the hill into the pond. So we had never quite intended to dig quite this deep in this area, but it turned out that's how far we had to go to get the good soil. So we just did what we had to do. And in the end, every additional bit of excavation just means more water storage. So this is the excavation for both the material. You can see on the picture on the right, we have the sort of sandy, gravelly, light brown material, and then the darker material that's really not particularly suitable for use. So this again is repairing the breach in the northern embankment. A couple of other things that we did. Ponds overflow. It's a rule of thumb in engineering. You can't build a pond big enough that eventually it's not going to overflow. As a result, you construct a spillway. In this case, this is, while we were there and trenching for it, it's now a concrete wall that actually sticks up above the ground about 2 feet. The reason you do that is because you want to identify the place where the water will overflow, because it will eventually overflow. So this is slightly lower than the top of the embankment, and it's made of concrete, and there's stone actually placed around it so that when water overflows, it's overflowing at a place that's resistant to the flow of water. So it enhances the overall structure of the integrity of the system. And a cattle trough was built. This is just downstream of the pond. We wanted to avoid having the cattle wandering into the pond or any other livestock, to try and keep the water quality a little bit higher. Obviously cattle do what they need to do wherever they happen to find themselves. So we have a water intake inside the pond. The water is piped out to the trough, and farmers can bring their cattle to get water from the pond without having them go into the pond. And then while all of this was going on, the surplus material that we didn't, the poor quality material that we weren't going to use in the embankment, we started using to fill in some of the erosion gullies to try and heal the landscape. At the same time, we had asked the community to do a couple of things, one of which was to stop allowing the livestock to graze in the watershed, in the area uphill of the pond. We wanted to see vegetation become reestablished so that the soil was stable. And we also asked them to plant sisal. It's a native plant. It's very hardy. It's a succulent, and it's nasty. Cattle don't like it. They won't go near it because it's kind of thorny and prickly. But it's a good way to stabilize the soil. And they did that. They planted rows of sisal. They're still kind of little, but they'll get bigger. And it was remarkable the difference that we saw even in 1 year of not having grazing. Much of this area in the photo on the right, the year before, would have essentially just been sand. So the vegetation does come back with the rains, and hopefully over time this area will become stabilized. It helps protect the pond because it diminishes the amount of sediment that washes down the hill. The other thing that we did, this is people collecting water. There is, as I mentioned, there is a well. The well is connected to a number of community distribution points scattered throughout the community. The entire community is not covered, but there are a few places where people do get water when it is pumped to the domestic water points. This is one of those water points, and these are people who've queued up to collect water. People said that they were always really happy when we came because the people who managed the well would pump it for the people as well as the cows, just so that they didn't get caught not providing enough water for the people in the community. So side benefit. But that brings us to one of the things that we wanted to find out. We're trying to look at this not just as we're going to go work on a pond, but as we are trying to understand how water is used in the community, where it comes from, how much is needed, how people use it, so that we can address water as an issue overall rather than simply from the point of view of we're going to build a pond and it's going to fill up with water. Because even if we do keep the cows from going and pooping in the pond, the water is not going to be that clean. And it's going to be centrally located. It's going to be a really convenient place for people to get water. We even have seen pictures of people collecting water from the pond, and we really don't want that. Because what we want to do, eventually, the outcome we would like to see for this project is enough water of appropriate quality for everyone and everything in the community. By the way, it's a population of roughly 1,800 people, 5,000 cows, and 10,000 goats and sheep. So, along with the construction work last year, we did a household outreach. We visited, I think in the end, about 48 different compounds and spoke with the householders, the heads of households. This was done by teams of the students, along with interpreters. The gentleman standing with the blue wrap, his name is Kakwi Ngalasoni. He's from the community. He was helping translate into the local language, Ma. We also had Erasto Mangena, who is from TPP, the organization that Tula has been working with. He was interpreting in Swahili, as well as Helen, who was sitting to the left of Alexa, who is a university student in Tanzania, one of the things that we've done both in Cameroon and Tanzania is we try to bring along engineering students from the host country. It's both for the translation skills, but also sort of cultural interpretation, help us understand the context of where we're working. It's been a really wonderful thing, and Helen will be joining us again this year. So the kind of things we were asking people were, how much water do you get? Where do you get it? Where do you go at different times of year to get water? What health issues do you have that may arise from drinking poor quality water? And we came up with these graphics to try and depict those issues. We learned some interesting things. A lot of people rely on roof runoff in the rainy season. They will have gutters and buckets and they'll collect water. In the dry season, it tends to be just the ponds. In the rainy season, there's also the streams, but the streams are somewhat problematic, and then there's some access to the well water. The idea, we hope, is that when we go back in another couple of years, once everything is finished and there's new ways of managing water overall, that we will see transformations in this data, that we will see people moving the cattle more and more to the lower quality water sources, and the households will get more and more of the higher quality water, so that everyone is getting water. It's economical for them to get water, and they're making the best use of the highest quality water. We'd really rather have the kids have it than the cows. This is just some of the data. So in the rainy season, they may be typically traveling 0.7 of a kilometer. It's about 0.4 of a mile. Dry season, by comparison, 2.5 kilometers, about 1.5 miles. The time spent, 45 minutes as opposed to 2 hours and 45 minutes. The rainy season, the costs rise a little bit because of the heavier usage of the borehole water. But that's where we're hoping that, when people don't have to spend as much to water their cattle, they can spend they'll be more open to spending the money to water their children. We do water quality testing whenever we're in the community, just to understand what the challenges are. The images on the left are Petri films. It's like a Petri dish, except it's printed on paper. And we sample all of the sources that people use and test them. And as you can see, there are several, the two top, the sort of four to the left, all actually represent water that is from the borehole, and they are relatively or completely clean, as compared to the ones on the other side, which are either from ponds or from the dugout wells, groundwater wells, and they are nasty. We don't want nasty. In addition, we've tested for nitrates, fluoride, arsenic. There is an issue with slightly elevated fluoride levels in the water. It's a very difficult challenge to address. We're looking into what might be done, but it's a problem. It can lead to long-term health problems over a lifetime of exposure. Nitrates, arsenic, not a problem. And then we also track school attendance, and we are getting some information from the little clinic in the community in terms of what diseases, how often the clinician sees people with complaints that may be related to water quality. The biggest ones are gastrointestinal illness or skin rashes and things, skin problems. And so this is a couple of years worth of data at this point showing the fluctuation of disease incidence for children and for adults. And then the other line that wiggles around is actually the rainfall. And some of the interesting things are that you can see on the left-hand end, there's a real spike in gastrointestinal disease in the dry season, which we would expect. because they're using poorer quality water. And then there's a real spike in skin-related illness when the rains come, because when the rains resume, there's a lot of the waste from the animals that's sitting on the ground gets flushed into the ponds and the water sources, and so people are picking up skin infections at that point. Another thing that we always try to do is make sure that people understand who we are, why we're there, and what we're going to do. So we always have meetings with the community as soon as we arrive to reintroduce ourselves, explain what the plans are, and then at the end of the trip, we always meet again to talk about what we've accomplished, what people's reaction is to what's going on, make sure that we're understanding their concerns and that we're trying to address them as best we can. And then something that we're planning for this year is more of a formal effort on hygiene and water handling education. Sitting down both with groups of adults and groups of children to make sure that we're getting across the importance of properly handling water, properly storing water, why certain sources of water are more appropriate for human consumption than others, and how they might be able to treat water from a lower quality source if that's what they have available to them. So this is just, I had to fit in the before after. It was really satisfying. We obviously worked there during the dry season. It's a lot easier to work there. It's what fits into the academic schedule. So we left with a big dry hole in the ground and waited several months to find out what would happen. The rains came, it holds water. The cattle are happy, the people are happy. Our next effort really is, although this looks like a lot of water, and it's probably about 12 feet deep right along the embankment, a lot of it's only a foot deep. We now need to start expanding the excavation back away from the dam. Ideally, what we'd like to do is bring the pond capacity up close to what we calculate would get to the pond based on the annual rainfall and the area that's contributing flow to the pond. So last year, the storage volume we created is roughly 5,000 cubic meters. We're hoping to get another maybe 8,000 cubic meters excavated out this year, depending on our budget. And that's going to go a long way toward bringing the pond close to matching up its capacity to the available water. That would be ideal. Ideally, we want the pond to just want to overflow when the last rain falls at the end of the rainy season. I don't know that we'll ever get there, but that would be sort of the ideal solution. And this was, the students insisted that I had to understand what a meme was, so apparently this is a meme. The image on the left is a common meme, and they associated it with bad dirt and good dirt. So I would get it. So now I know what a meme is. And that's aside from once again expressing my gratitude to your community for the support you provided, that's really what I came to say. I'm happy to talk to you later, answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Glory to you, Lord.
Then Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles. but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the wilds. Then Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside, a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission, and the demons came out of the man and entered the swine. And the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The Gospel of the Lord.